says this is bigger than Dr. Fauci. There's more people involved here. Jeffrey Taubenberger was the one who resurrected or reconstructed the Spanish flu from Breivik Mission, Alaska. But it wasn't, it was Dr. Yoshihiro Kawaoka from the University of Wisconsin that did the gain of function on it. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Can we go to the next slide? All right, so this is influenza and coronavirus, neck and neck. And if you look at the data up on top, Jason, if you zoom into the heading on the top there, total COVID deaths, 205,000. Total influenza deaths, 274,000. So when Kent Hickenlively says Dr. Fauci is not an honest guy, there's something called lies of omission, which is where you don't tell people something that's kind of important, like 4,000 people a week died of influenza every single week in 2020. This has never happened historically. I have the data to show this to the jury. This has never happened. So given that there are antiviral treatments like the one that Timothy Cunningham was championing, Xofluza. Timothy Cunningham said Xofluza is borderline a miracle drug. Why are we spending so much time and energy on vaccines? Xofluza is one tablet, one pill that treats H1N1. One dose, one pill, one tablet from Genentech. They must not be part of the inside circle. Let's go to the next slide if we can. What is the number one comorbidity of coronavirus deaths? So of people, of the 600,000 Americans that have died with coronavirus, what is the number one comorbidity? According to the CDC, it's on the next slide. And it's influenza. More than half of the people that died with coronavirus had influenza. But we just heard Dr. Fauci say there was no influenza with Brett Baer. But the data, according to the coroners, says something different. So again, this is the CDC's website that I'm using to get this data from, right? And this is just math. I'm not interpreting it. Just one is bigger than the other, right? So people with influenza and people that don't have influenza, there's not much interpretation here. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so then as a data analyst, what I started to do was look at the different groups by age and see by age category, were more people dying with influenza or without influenza with COVID? And it seemed that in every single age category, can you zoom into that legend, Jason, in the middle of that slide there, which shows us what blue and green are? Yeah. So one is deaths with COVID and pneumonia with and without influenza, right? So one has no influenza and one is everybody else. So the blue are people that do not have influenza and the green are the people that do. And what you see is there's a lot of people that have influenza with COVID, but nobody talked about that. Now, the reason this is important is there is no FDA-approved therapeutic treatment for coronavirus that the WHO has authorized. Yet there is for the influenza. When we look at children under 1 year, 1 to 4 and 5 to 14, most of the kids that died with coronavirus, according to the CDC, also had influenza. Most of them, way more than 50%. Yet, were they treated therapeutically with antivirals? Let's go to the next slide. We get to comorbidities. In the comorbidity section on the CDC's website, what they explain is that 5% of the big number are people who died just with SARS-CoV-2. The remaining 95% of the people had on average 4 comorbidities. So if you have an average of 4, well, that means there's a bunch of people that have got 7. and 8 comorbidities, right? So these are things like cancer, Alzheimer's, right? Other terminal conditions. But what we look at is what's the number one comorbidity? Influenza. Influenza P&I by far is the number one comorbidity according to. Now, the question then is, why would they not tell us about this second affliction? Because if it's an evil one, when Dr. Judy, I think, is just scratching the surface and, not telling us, when you talk about US AMRID, right? When you talk about the stuff done at Fort Detrick, this particular 1918 strain is the deadliest virus on the planet. And they've been doing gain of function research on it at University of Wisconsin. No wonder Fauci wants everybody talking about Wuhan, because he doesn't want them talking about Taubenberger. He doesn't want them talking about Kawaoka and the reconstruction of the deadliest virus on earth. He wants you talking about China. Blame it on China. Blame it on the bats. Keep looking in Wuhan. So here's why we come back to the maps. Why are the maps relevant? Because there aren't 10 people dead in Beijing. Because there aren't 10 people dead in Shanghai. Because there aren't 250 people dead in Hong Kong. And for the last 10 weeks in the United States, more people have died from influenza than from COVID. And not only has Fauci not told you this, neither has Anderson Cooper, Rachel Maddow, Sean Hannity, David Muir. Why is this the fact that more people have died every week for the last 10 weeks in the United States from pneumonia and influenza than from coronavirus? And this is straight from the CDC. The reason must be that the strain of influenza points right back to Walter Reed and Taubenberger and Fauci, and it's got his fingerprint on it. The minute you saw that, Dr. Mikovits, if I showed you the 1918 H1 strain, how long would it take you to figure out, oh my God, is this what I'm looking at?